the British did not want any kind of resolution. All right. So, and they knew the kind of person Gandhi was. The question was, how much should they return? How much should they return? This was the question. And actually, the correct set of events is, Gandhi said, it was Gandhi who said actually. Gandhi said that they wanted just 50% of the amount. 50% of the amount. That, again, this is very important, that they had illegally and deceitfully extorted from the British, from the Indian sharecroppers. And one important British missionary who was in the know of the proceedings of this particular agreement, or had observed this particular meeting from very close quarters, writes that to British it appeared that Gandhi was adamant. Gandhi was adamant at 50%. And because they did not want any kind of resolution, they said they will not pay 50%. They will not pay 50%, but will only pay 25%. Again, of the same amount that they had illegally and deceitfully extorted from the British, from the Indian sharecroppers. And to their surprise, Gandhi agreed. To their surprise, Gandhi agreed. Now, when later on, this is very important, this particular landmark is very, very important. And later on, when Gandhi was asked as to why he agreed to being paid 25% only of the amount, to only 25% of the amount that the British had deceitfully and illegally extorted from the Indians, Gandhi said money was less important. Money was less important. Was less important. Was less important. What was more important was the fact that the British had been made to bow down before the Indians for the first time, of course, and in doing so they had lost part of their prestige and part of their money. This is how he reasoned out his decision to agree to being paid, in agreeing to being paid 25% of the amount. Again, very important from examination point of view. Now, when after this episode, the important consequence of this particular episode was that the sharecroppers for the first time realized that they had someone to fall back on. That they had someone to fall back on. That they too had someone who would support them. And in this process, the quantum of fear that they had of the British lessened, and learned self-reliance in this process. Which is very, very important. Self-reliance, rather. This is extremely important. Now, at one point in time during this entire episode, lawyers who were guiding Gandhi in this episode of Indigo movement came to Gandhi and sought his permission if they could include a British pacifist, a British pacifist, whose name was Charles Freer Andrews. They sought Gandhi's permission if they could include Charles Freer Andrews, who was a British pacifist, in their movement against the British, thinking that this would give them an added advantage. Gandhi refused. Gandhi again pulled them up, told them that their thought of including a British pacifist, Charles Freer Andrews, in their struggle against the British was a sign of their weakness, in fact reflected the fact that they did not believe that their struggle against the British was not just. He told them that their fight against the British was justified. They demanded what was actually due to them. And they only wanted, the lawyers that is, they only wanted Charles Freer Andrews as a decorative piece of item to give them an added advantage. Yet another instance of how Gandhi taught the concept, the idea of self-reliance to the British, to the lawyers and the Indians and sharecroppers in general. Fine. After the resolution of this, Gandhi stays back in Champaran and in fact calls his disciples from across India, and they all put up for a little longer after the resolution and teaches the poor Indians such basic concepts as hygiene and the importance of nutrition, because we must understand that the Indians were unlettered at that particular point in time. Now, before we wind up this particular lesson, you must understand the way the lesson begins. The lesson begins with a piece of conversation between Gandhi and his biographer. And in the middle of conversation, Gandhi tells Louis Fisher one very, very important thing.